Hello, my name's Emily. I'm a clinical counselor and an herbal medicine enthusiast, and I'm excited to ask you the question today. Do you know Carl? You know Carl. Carl Linnaeus? He's pretty important. He created taxonomy, which is that system, you know it, the system of binomial naming everything in the entire planet, from animals to plants, Homo sapiens, how we all have two names. So that's what we're going to get into today, why it's important and what makes Carl so cool. So, why do we need taxonomy anyways? If I told you my favorite plant was plantain, which of these two images would come to mind? A, the fruit on the left, or B, the leafy green on the right? I think it's a fair question, and it can be a little confusing. For A, the fruit plantain is Musa paradisiaca. It's a hybrid. That's why the X is there in the species name. That denotes it's a hybrid, which is interesting in of itself because hybrids have very different chemistry and can have different growing properties. B is Plantago major, which is probably what most herbalists are talking about when they're talking about plantain because it has some pretty special properties. And we'll definitely do a deep dive on plantain at some point in the future. Why is it important? Well, we want to make sure we're talking about the same thing. Just like there's thousands of examples where the common name is not the same across different continents or different countries, even different regions. Sometimes call a name by something colloquially, and it's can make it the lines blurry on what you're actually talking about. For example, bluebell. There's three different types of bluebells across the world, and they're not related at all. They're not even in the same close family or cousins. So it can be dangerous if we're talking about medicinal uses of a plant and you don't know which plant you're actually talking about. If you take the wrong one, then it could be dangerous. It might have something in it that's poisonous or harmful to something in your body. So we need to know what we're talking about. And then if you want to do any research on these plants, I am, arguably a nerd, but I wanted to know what the current research was on dandelion because I want to do a deep dive video and show you all the amazing things dandelion can do. But to do that, then I need to look up its government name. I got to use Taraxacum officinale to figure out what current research has been done. And the spoiler alert is a lot. And even in the last 3 years, there's been a lot done. So it helps us find what we're looking for and make sure we're all talking about the same thing. And then we can understand the relationships between plants. And what that means is that this system is so organized that within families, there are a lot of common things like plants. We'll talk about it in a few slides, but plants within the same family tend to look alike and do some of the same types of things. So it helps us understand why that is and where they might be helpful in our body. Carl was cool, man. He was the son of a Lutheran pastor. He did all the things. He studied medicine, botany, theology, went to school for it, like was a doctor, and then decided he was going to do this ultimate organizational task, which is insane, to organize all the plants and animals. I mean, can you imagine how long that would take? And his organizational system stood the test of time, and it's what we're still using today. So it's pretty amazing. He was a fervent believer in God, and he thought that nature was the best way to study God's handiwork and really get in there and see the complexities that could only be explained by a divine creator. His scientific study was showing the order and the complexity that already existed. That dos scrivit, Linnaeus disposit. I don't speak Latin. That's fine. That was the phrase most associated with Carl, and it just means that God created, Linnaeus organized, and organized he did. He did a lot of work, and his students did a lot of work in helping us understand the differences and similarities between all these different plants and animals. We're going to focus on the plants today, though. So here's an example of how the classification system works. You can see on the left-hand side there humans. That would be us, dogs, wolf, and you'll notice at the top there, those are on the kingdom Animalia. That is you. You are an animal. But we'll talk about the two columns on the right, which is Plantae. So that's got Old Man Benisca, Common Daisy. They're both in Plantae. And then you'll notice they're in the same phylum class. And then we get down to order, and that's where things start mixing up for them. So Protealis versus Astralis, Proteaceae versus Asteraceae, etc. And when you get down to the species name, you'll see that it's the two name system. And the first name is always capitalized, and the second name is always not capitalized. And then the translation of the Latin species name is normally something that makes sense. I think Carl got a little tired, after some of the plants, some of them are a little bit funnier than others or a little bit more descriptive. But in this case, babiska with saw-like leaves, very descriptive. See of the species name for that babiska, or beautiful everlasting for the species name of the daisy. So families matter, and families often have some common traits, like a family motto. That's why we have the big shield there. So some examples: the mint family, Lemonaceae, they all tend to have similar medicinal properties. Maybe not every single one of them, but they tend to. So they could be aromatic. Everybody knows mints smell really nice. They have really strong fragrance. It's one of the stronger essential oils. They're nervine agents, so that means they act on the nervous system. They're digestive supporting. They're carminative. That's a fancy word that means that it helps you with gas and bloating. It comes from the Latin word to card. They used to card wool um, with teeths, from a teasel. What am I trying to think of? Like a thistle, like a pokey thing. They would card the wool and make it all straightened out so that they could make yarn with it or whatever they were going to do. And in this case, they're trying to say it's carding out your digestive system. So it's straightening out the mess that's happening in your digestive system whenever you have gas and bloating. Antimicrobial, we know what that is. Some examples: lemon balm, sage, rosemary, thyme. And I say their family motto is calm the nerves, settle the stomach, and clear the head. Then the aster family, Asteraceae, are overachievers. They all tend to be bitters. They tend to support your liver. They tend to provide immune support, wound healing internally, externally, and inflammation support. And there's some examples there: dandelion, chamomile, echinacea, calendula, yarrow. And their family motto will be bitter today, better tomorrow. They're good ones. The officinale or officinalis plants, they tend to be used interchangeably, are really interesting because that's the second word in the species name. So, for example, Taraxacum officinale is dandelion. They all came from the officina, which is the apothecary of the monastery or the storeroom of the monastery. And that's important because it means that the monastery was using them medicinally at the time that Carl and his friends were going around and labeling everything. So they had a proven history of being used. Doesn't mean they're all used today, but there are quite a lot of them that still are. You can see the picture on the right: Officina Perfuma Pharmacia, close enough, di Santa Maria Novella. That's a real life monastery, Officina, that is still in use, still selling things in Florence today. It's been in existence since 1221, and they sell things such as the bottle that I put on there on the left of Frisia lotion. So you can go to Italy today and go check out what a real officina was, the pharmacy that had all these medicinal plants. So historically, the plants that had this name attached to their species name were recognized as medicinal plants. But like I said, not every single medicinal plant we use today is an officina plant. Some of the good example is that Western medicine, some of the Asian practices were probably not exported to Europe yet, so they weren't in those monasteries. They wouldn't have the officinale name. So some of the Hall of Fame members of the officinale plants, many of them we definitely know and love: dandelion, lemon balm, sage, calendula. There's tons there, and there's a good deal of them that do warrant extra study, and we'll do some longer videos on many of them. Rosemary there at the bottom you see has an asterisk because they actually changed its name to Salvia for the species because they decided that it actually is in the sage family instead of where they had it before. So, the joke is that if you want to get a PhD in botany, that you have to rename something, which may or may not be true. But after scientific research, everything's already been named. So now they move stuff around occasionally, and sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. An interesting one is Ginkgo biloba. It's not an officinale plant. That would be the second name there. So biloba is its second name, Ginkgo biloba. The biloba part means you see the leaf on the left that's green and on the right that's yellow, how it has a separation in the middle. Um, Live long and prosper. That means it has two lobes, so biloba. The ginkgo is super unique because it doesn't have any relatives, which is wild. So you'll notice their family order class division all have that gink prefix. It has no cousins. It's a living fossil, and we can thank the monks in the monasteries for this as well, except now the Asian monks, the Buddhist monks, intentionally kept this plant alive because they valued it medicinally and spiritually. And it's an interesting plant, and it needs its own study as well. A cool fact is that after the Hiroshima bombs, the ginkgo, there were 6 ginkgo trees that actually survived and produced leaves and are still living today. So that's interesting. And there's some of these trees that are over 1,000 years old that are massive today. So I hope that this quick run through of what Carl did for us and why the Latin names and species names of these plants are important, and what you might pique your interest as you're perusing herbal medicine and looking at those officinale plants and some of the other plants that we all know and love, and maybe even just the Latin translation and seeing what Carl thought they look like, which is kind of fun in and of itself. I hope that the welcome weed helps you to welcome more weeds in your life and stay curious. Have a good day.